one of the most beautiful days I have ever seen our church, with the palms that are hung and displayed with so much love and care, and the palms that the children have left here on the ground for us. A physical reminder, something real, something we can touch, something we can hold in our hand. It tells us, these palms, that ours is an embodied faith, a faith with flesh on it, an incarnational faith. The social critic Barbara Ehrenreich points out in her book about public celebration that there are no cave paintings in places like Lascaux of two people after a successful hunt sitting down to have a conversation about it. Instead, we see people celebrating, dancing, moving their bodies. And that is what we have in our meetings today. Two public displays of emotion. One joyful, one tragic. The joyful one. Jesus is coming down from the Mount of Olives, and he is clearly prearranged with some of his friends from Bethany, perhaps, or Bethphage, to have an SUV and maybe a convertible all lined up for himself. I'm sorry, a donkey and a pig. He says, the keys will be in the ignition, and if anyone asks you where you're taking these fine vehicles, just give them the code word, the Lord sent you. And it says that there were multitudes of people lining the road. I'm remembering the time that we drove down that Mount of Olives and started to approach, going up the hill into the city of Jerusalem. What that must have been like. Lining everywhere are olive trees and branches. And it says there were a multitude of disciples. You can just imagine why they were there. Well, first of all, we know why everybody was there. It was Passover. Jerusalem was the center of everything. Passover, it was like a combination of New Year's Eve and Times Square and Mardi Gras and New Orleans and the 4th of July in every single small town across America and every single public celebration and festival you can imagine. It was all happening in Jerusalem. That was the center. It was the place where God dwelt. It was the place where everything happened, where all the worlds of that time would come together. And there they were in that moment of celebration, the best homecoming and party possible. So the spirit in the air must have been electric. People must have been just on the brink of joy. And so there is a multitude of disciples, says Luke's gospel. And they were ready to go, loaded for bear. And they threw their cloaks down, and they grabbed whatever was handy, and they raised them, and they said, "Blessed is this new king. He's clearly David's son. He's clearly the one who's been chosen by God." And that's kind of a problem because Jerusalem already has a king. It never really works out when you have two at any given place. They tend to come one at a time. But there's all the people, and what have they come for? Why are they there? They've come for all the reasons that we've come. They've come because their bodies hurt and they want healing. They've come because their souls hurt and they want relief. They've come because they've heard that this king is a king who believes in justice for all people. They've heard that this is the king who shows mercy. They've come because they've heard that this is the healer who includes women. This is the healer who includes the poor and the wealthy. The healer who includes the tax collector as much as the saint. This is the healer, this is the preacher, this is the teacher, this is someone more, and he is coming into our midst, into the time of freedom, into the time of celebration, into a city that's been corrupted by empire, into a time that says we escaped into freedom from another empire. We can know that freedom again. This is the King who brings freedom, and they threw their cloaks down, and they threw down the palm branches. They brought their bodies, the way that you have brought your bodies today. So how is it going to be for the next few days? I'm always grateful for the presence of Peter in any given gospel. Peter is so full of bravado and a few other things. Peter, who, when they're all tucked away safe and far away from the madding crowd, says, I'll be right there beside you, Jesus, ride or die. But it turns out that doesn't quite work out that way. I feel that way sometimes. I want to be ride or die with Jesus, but it's hard. And yet there's Jesus saying, I know. I forgive you. You be you, and I'll be me. There are all the other people Jesus will encounter this week. And in this holiest of weeks, in this holiest of places, we have the opportunity to go on pilgrimage with him, to walk with him. And you know the thing about pilgrimage, it's not like going on a spa vacation. Pilgrimage can be wonderful, but it can be disorienting. It can be uncomfortable. It puts us in places where we haven't been before. It puts us in encounters with people that we might not experience otherwise. And that's not always the most comfortable place for us to be. This week in our parish, we're going to go on a bit of a Holy Week pilgrimage ourselves. On Wednesday night, we're going to risk breaking bread with people we don't know as well, up at Christ Church in Bethlehem. Break bread, wash feet, strip the altar. On Friday morning, you can come back here after the long vigil of prayer. We can come back here and remember our own vulnerability. Let me tell you, vulnerability is not part of a popular message these days. I think we'll be here together. 7 o'clock, we'll be down at Center Church, remembering the Passion together with friends from other Christian traditions in our own town. That this is something we do together, going on a journey with Jesus. There's some risk involved here. All of this is countercultural. When was the last time you had a long conversation with someone outside of church about things like death, things like fear? We like to push that stuff aside. But in this week, we can just acknowledge the truth of it. That sometimes we're afraid. Sometimes we're angry. Sometimes we're hurting. We need more. And when we go on this pilgrimage together, there's this safety in acknowledging that. At the same time, there's the risk of revealing to the world who we really are, followers of Jesus. This week we'll be on this pilgrimage. We'll risk the vulnerability, the discomfort, the disorientation. And then all of it culminates in coming back here. Because we know that these difficult conversations are not the end. For us, we know that death is not the final word. And Saturday night at 8 o'clock, when we light the new fire outside, bring the fire back in and retell the story of our salvation piece by piece. We remember why we risk so much, why we take the journey, why we submit ourselves so willingly to disorientation and discomfort. I love that our scripture readings this morning reference our bodies so much. If you go back and look, you can name all the body parts in the first 3 readings. Our tongue, our ears, our hearts, our back, our face, our cheeks, our hands. This is a faith of incarnation. This is a faith of being embodied. In our pageantry, in our liturgies, in our songs, in the beauty of our churches, in the disorientation of movement, We will place ourselves with Jesus on this road. Even if we're a little bit like Peter. It's okay now, harder later. But there's room for everybody. Everybody at this table. I hope you will walk with me this week. I look forward to sharing this journey with you. In the name of God.